I think Kyle Kulinski has very bad political instincts, and I think his take on the endorsement from Cheney is just wrong.
Yeah, so I saw recently on my Twitter timeline that Kyle Kulinski responded to someone who was apparently a little bit unsatisfied with some of his commentary, recent criticism of the Kamala campaign, specifically as it relates to her touting the endorsement of Dick Cheney and talking a lot about bipartisanship, trying to reach across the aisle. So Kyle put out this tweet. He said, "Hey, at Hutchinson," and this is a YouTube creator that I recently found out about. Seems like he's sort of in the Destiny sphere. I think he actually recently had a chat with Destiny. So part of that crowd, I suppose. He made a video saying Kyle Kulinski is wrong about Kamala Harris's campaign. Kyle says, "Hey, we'd love to have you on Crystal Kyle and Friends to discuss your disagreement with me." To which he did respond, said hi. So it looks like that discussion, debate, whatever you want to call it, might in fact be happening. But I am really interested, Zach, in your opinion on the substance of this dude's criticisms.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and get into it if you're ready. One thing I do admire about Kyle is he's getting back into his Debate Me Bro era, and I think he's using specifically the platform that they've created on Crystal Kyle and Friends to do more of that. Obviously, they'll have dummies like us on there every once in a while, but sometimes they do real serious broadcasting over on the Crystal Kyle and Friends. I'm excited to see this debate if it happens.
Apparently, as Autumn Leaves points out, he was a former Call of Duty YouTuber, recently transitioned in the political space. So let's see if he has the chops, Zach, to make it in our streets, in our realm.
Absolutely. Or if we'll snipe him while he's still fresh.
In today's video, we are going to be covering Kamala building one of the most unique, if not the most unique coalition that I've ever.
All right, we're only going to address this once before we start getting bombarded by chat. I try and stay away from ad hominem attacks. It does not appear that this is a sexually transmitted disease, but rather a fashion piece, a lip ring, a la Tom DeLonge, All the Right Things music video. Anyway, yes, chat, have a field day with that. We're going to discuss this man's ideas instead.
Yeah, we're taking the high road.
Absolutely.
In my 41 years of being an American.
You're 41 and you have a I'm sorry. We're going to let it go. We're going to let it go.
Now, it is absolutely true that if you would have told me 10 years ago that Kamala would be teaming up with a Cheney to take down Donald Trump in an election, I think I would have probably, I think my head would have exploded. I just don't think I would have believed you.
Yeah, that's because it's stupid to do that.
Dick Cheney, for me growing up, was such a galvanizing force in the sense that he was one of the worst people within the Bush administration who, during my extremely formative years in early college, had done a tremendous amount of damage and destruction to not only Iraq, but our international standing as well. Long story short, he was just an embarrassment. He was one of the things that I would.
Just a quick note on this guy's political commentary. A lot of quick edits in the middle of like a pretty easy point to make. This guy would get absolutely monstrously manhandled by Kyle if they debate each other. Kyle's a fax machine. He's not going to stumble. He's not going to need to look at his computer. He doesn't need you to remind him what it was like to live under the George Bush, Dick Cheney regime. I just feel like Kyle is going to fax machine this guy into oblivion if he tries to bring this weak ass argument forward.
Yeah, I have a feeling this guy's going to try to not even debate at all and just be like, I see what you're saying, friendly disagreement, and then move on.
Yeah.
Because how are you going to win a debate against Kyle on these grounds? I've said it before, but like I get what Kamala is doing with the Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney thing. I would think it would be more forgivable if she was actually teaming up with more popular Republicans that people in that identified with the conservatives in this country actually felt favorably about. But as it is, it's like Liz Cheney's a massive loser. She just lost re-election. Why are you going to trot out a
it wasn't
huge
even
loser?
close.
No, not at all. It was a complete humiliation.
Point to when I was very young to legitimize the fact that I felt kind of ashamed to be an American. Liz Cheney's politics are, in my opinion, very bad, almost detestable. I have basically nothing in common with her on policy, but one thing we do share a common affinity for is liberal democracy and protecting our institutions and recognizing that Trump poses a great threat to all of them.
Why are we doing some whitewashing of Liz Cheney? This woman would be so down for fascism as long as it had the veneer of respectability in front of it. That's what Liz Cheney does not respect about Donald Trump. She doesn't give a about the institutions of America? Do you not? You just said you remembered the Bush administration. Did he not just say he remembered the Bush administration? You ever heard of the Patriot Act? Do you ever remember? Do you know what happened before 9/11 and after 9/11 in this country? Do you know how we lost so many of our fundamental rights? Do you know how the government started spying on everyone en masse? What the about this institution does Liz Cheney seem to have so much reverence for? That's why that's a disgrace. Because if Kamala Harris wants to stand for democracy, if Kamala Harris wants to stand against fascism, if she wants to show respect for the institution that is America, you cannot do so with the warm welcome of the Cheney. Are you kidding me? The Cheney family, the Cheney chain gang. Are you kidding me? It's ridiculous.
These things. So if you've been following online discourse in the last couple of weeks, you will be well aware of the fact that Kamala touting Dick Cheney's endorsement, Kamala touting Liz Cheney's endorsement has been a source of controversy in left-wing spaces. A lot of people think that it's a shameful thing for her to accept the endorsement of a man like Dick Cheney, who was himself in many ways directly responsible for suffering on a magnitude that is difficult to comprehend in Iraq. We're talking about at minimum hundreds of thousands dead. At minimum, 1 to 2 million people displaced. It was one of the worst foreign policy blunders in our nation's history. I don't think that we should forget that. I also think that we need to appreciate the moment that we're in right now. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that Donald Trump represents an existential threat to this country. If not immediately, then by virtue of the fact that he constantly tries to chip away and is sometimes successful at chipping away.
Here's what frustrates me about these super lib programmed YouTubers, right? The people who just come out here and find a way to say the Democrats are based no matter what they do, is that just because we need to meet this political moment, just because Donald Trump does represent a huge threat to our democracy and a huge threat to our country, doesn't mean it should be against the law to criticize the Democrats or to point out when they're making obvious political missteps, right? Like, I'm not saying that the Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney thing is going to cost them the election, but I think it's a bad look. And if you're trying to stand out as, like, you know, the joy candidates, if you're trying to be the candidates that represent the future, it's tone deaf and it's a bad decision to make. I don't understand why people have decided you can't criticize Kamala Harris at all when she's making a bad decision. If, oh, it's the extraneous threat of Donald Trump. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, a lot of the people in this destiny sphere do the exact same thing, where it's like, bro, we're not criticizing the Democrats because we prefer the Republicans. We're criticizing the Democrats because our criticisms, if they took our advice, it would make them more likely to win. We're not coming at this from a place of just like trying to tear down the Democrats. We want them to go back to being the party of the working people. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, yeah, it's not a good strategy. It's not a good strategy. It'd be one thing if Kamala got like the endorsement of the governor of Georgia. What's his name? I forget, but he's a really popular Republican in Georgia. The guy that Trump was recently shitting all over, going to war with. What's his name?
Brian Kemp.
Yeah, Brian Kemp. Like, if Brian Kemp endorsed Kamala Harris, I honestly would not blame her at all for going out there at a rally, proudly accepting his endorsement, because it makes sense. She needs to win Georgia, and he has a high approval rating in the state. People like him more than they like Trump in Georgia. That would make sense. But again, who does Liz Cheney represent? Who does Dick Cheney represent? Kamala can't win Wyoming. And even if she could, Liz Cheney just lost re-election in Wyoming. So she's not even popular in her home state. The only people that she speaks for are probably almost certainly already voting for Kamala Harris. So I just think it's dumb to trot out someone who's so objectively unpopular. It would be like if the Republicans, like, you know, proudly accepted the endorsement of Anthony Weiner and we're like, see, we have a Democrat on our team now. And it's like, I see what you're doing, but not that guy, please. Not that guy. He's not a good spokesperson for the Democratic Party.
Or what about Tulsi Gabbard, which they try and parade out, right? Like, this was a Democratic Congress. It's like, yeah, dude, everybody's seen that grift a mile away. Tulsi never stood for anything but Tulsi. Okay, and that's become so obvious.
Yeah.
But we can keep playing this.
At our norms that keep our institutions strong. If nothing else, this sets the stage for someone to come down the line, and their job of upending democracy, if that was their goal, would be much easier, because someone like Donald Trump came before him. Donald Trump tried to disenfranchise literally tens of millions of voters spread across a half a dozen or so swing states because he didn't like the results of the election. He tried to sue.
I'm sorry, but this is some of the most brain dead analysis. But this guy is just so out of his element. It's like, Donnie, you're out of your element. Go back to Call of Duty.
In courts up and down the country to toss those people's votes out. I live in California, a very safe blue state, but if I lived in a state like Arizona, if I lived in a state like Georgia, if I lived in a state like Pennsylvania, where Trump would have tried to have thrown my vote out, I would have been livid. I already am livid, but if I lived in one of those states, that would infuriate me. So the stakes of the
Hey, remember when George Bush and Dick Cheney threw out a bunch of votes in Florida so that George Bush could win the election? Does that infuriate you, pal? Or is that just a consequence of history? Because, Dick Cheney, am I right? LOL, Donald Trump.
this election are very, very high as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of people don't agree with Kamala's decision to proudly tout these endorsements. One of those individuals is Kyle Kulinski. He gives his take here.
She's doing this big fawning event with Liz Cheney. First of all, her approval rating is abysmally low. Like, nobody actually likes her. And second of all, I don't know, have you seen an event like this be done with, say, Bernie Sanders, right? Or somebody who more represents the left worldview? No, because it's like they're taken for granted. She recently rejected a meeting with the uncommitted movement. Right? So it's like run and hide from my base who are telling me stop arming and funding Israel as they carpet bomb innocent civilians. Run and hide from them and then go snuggle up to Liz Cheney. So this is the first time you're starting to see some of the same, Hillary Clinton type mistakes being made. These are Hillary Clinton type mistakes. As that famous drill tweet goes, you don't, under any circumstances, gotta hand it to ISIS.
So I want to start by saying that I think Kyle Kulinski is a conflicted individual in that I have seen him give some unbelievably base takes. I have seen him, for example, take Brianna Joy Gray to task.
What he's about to say is, wow, Kyle has nuance. He can walk and chew bubblegum. This guy is able to give an honest assessment of what's happening. And sometimes I agree with him and sometimes I don't. Like, this is absolutely crazy. Like, yeah, dude, he's not a shit lip. He's not reading lines. It's really clear that this guy started listening to Destiny when he was playing Call of Duty, and now he's just regurgitating a bunch of talking points. He has no political foundation. He watches MSNBC and he thinks they're spitting. You know what I mean? He basically does what other commentators who are just straight up Dem Party propagandists. He does it way shittier, right? He does it way shittier. He has none of the skill set that you would want from somebody to eloquently feed you a line of bullshit. I'm sorry, but he doesn't. Like,
He's just getting started. He's like a month into his career. He might,
I thought he
pick up
was
the
a
pace.
streamer from Call of Duty.
Yeah, that's a different audience, though. I mean, I'm just saying.
All right, we'll be nice to this shit.
Or not properly delegating enough responsibility to the Democratic Party in Minnesota for taking tiny majorities in the state legislature and the governorship and turning that into serious material gains for the state. But I've also heard him give his takes many a time that made me question his political instincts. So, for example, he supported the Force the Vote movement. If you're unfamiliar with what that is, there was a push early on in Biden's presidency from the
This guy is so out of his element. He doesn't understand anything. Yeah. Oh, guys, you can't trust this guy because a while ago he wanted the squad members to use their leverage. Is he going to give any mention to the fact that this guy founded Justice Democrats, which helped get all of those squad members into Congress in the first place? And then, yeah, guess what? When they got there, he wanted him to use the leverage that they swore up and down they were going to use. Now, what's Force the Vote perfect? No. Do we basically know what the end result of Force the Vote would have been? Yeah, absolutely. None of them would have supported a floor vote for Medicare for all, and they were all going to sell us down the river. So, hey, you know what? We only had to wait a few more years to get it all figured out. But the reality that somehow it was a catastrophic thing to want AOC and the squad members to band together and actually hold out for some leverage. I don't even give a fuck if it was about Nancy Pelosi. That was just the political moment at the time to band together and do something. Instead, we got I think it was an Ayanna Pressley quote where she says, "We all vote alone." Mm-hmm. Well, that's not a squad. That's not a progressive voting bloc. That's not what you guys ran on and fundraised for and misled the entire public into believing, right? No. And of course, it's disingenuous when people spend all of their time only criticizing the progressives in Congress. That's what people like Brianna Joy Gray, that's what people like Jimmy Dore do. But it doesn't mean that these people are somehow above criticism just because I agree with them more often than not. No, I'm still going to want to hold them accountable. These were the people that the regular working class folks, the Bernie bros, these are the folks that we sent money to donate to that said, hey, support these candidates. They're going to really take these individuals to task here. We're not sending another Elizabeth Warren to the Senate. We're sending, real renegade people like AOC to protest outside of Nancy Pelosi's office, right? So trying to act like that was some sort of an own for Kyle, as if that's some sort of a diss on his political instinct. It's like, bro, just go back to eating out of Destiny's trough.
Left flank
Yeah.
for members
sorry,
like
bro.
the squad.
Here, sorry, I just instantly.
Oh yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good.
No, go. What were you saying?
No, it's all good. I'll just break it in a second.
Ayanna Pressley, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, at the time Jamal Bowman. There was a push for them to withhold their vote for the House speakership in favor of Nancy Pelosi in order to try to acquire some leverage and then use that leverage to force a vote for Medicare for all on the House floor. This was a movement that was supported by people like Breonna Joy Gray and Jimmy Dore, and I think it was one of the most silly propositions that you could possibly suggest. Major healthcare reform in this country is something that has dogged basically every president in modern history, including Barack Obama, who wanted to go even further with the ACA. But
Oh my God, this exact kind of logic is why forced to vote was a necessary discussion. And obviously, Zach and I, we've probably made more videos mocking and lampooning Jimmy Dore in the last couple of years than anyone. But I will maintain that forced to vote was his last serious contribution to this space that I actually think was worthwhile, as ugly as it got. I thought it was a genuinely fascinating and necessary strategic conversation about how exactly the squad members should act in Congress. Exactly like you said, Zach, should they go along to get along, or should they be an aggressive left flank, a left-wing version of the Tea Party, which is originally how Kyle Kulinski envisioned Justice Democrats. Obviously, that did not come to fruition. But I think in retrospect, even if it wasn't successful, at least it would have been a real aggressive shot across the bow. At least it would have actually been using their influence as a collective in Congress to make a stand for something, specifically because that period of time, 2021, it really represented the end of the Bernie era. That's when everyone realized, oh shit, if we don't make a stand now and force Medicare for all to continually be part of the discussion, all the momentum will evaporate. All of this momentum will, escape the tire, whatever you want to say. And that's exactly what happened, unfortunately. And again, it's not like forced to vote necessarily 100% would have prevented that, but at least it would have kept the policy as something that the left was fighting for. At least it would have kept it in the discussion. And yeah, I think that despite the fact that there were a lot of grifters involved with that movement, Kyle Kulinski actually probably articulated the case better than anyone.
You can go as far back as Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, H.W. Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush, even. These are all presidents that wanted to do something big on healthcare, but were constrained by the Congress that they had at the time. There was no chance that something like Medicare for all could succeed in 2021. When Joe Biden was inaugurated, we didn't have nearly the kind of majorities that we would need.
That was not the argument anybody made. So clearly he had no idea what he was talking about. That's why he doesn't refute any of the arguments that anybody made, that it was about who in the Congress is willing to stick their neck out for the American people and be a mover and shaker and push the Overton window forward. That was the entire argument for force to vote. And it was one of the last arguments to, as Gavin said, keep it in the conversation. And Gavin, does it feel like Medicare for all is in the conversation anymore?
Sadly not.
No. So I think we were right.
In Congress to pursue such a sweeping piece of federal legislation. Not that I even oppose the legislation, but it would have been expansive. It would have been sweeping. In those cases, you need at least 60 firm yeses in the Senate because of the filibuster rule. So this is just one example.
This guy thinks that we need like 5th grade civics lessons from our YouTuber. That's how dumb he thinks you are. That's the kind of people who get spoon-fed this liberal shit. It's just people who are that, yes, they will come down on the right side of history. They're not fascists. They're not Donald Trump lovers, but they still want to just clap like seals. They want to be fed like baby birds, talking points that they already agree with, and they want reaffirmation that the Democrats are always right and the Republicans are always wrong. And we don't live in a world of black and whites like that. Like, yes, the Republicans are almost like 99 times more than that, 999 times out of 1,000. You might get a Republican that's based on one issue, like ending a war somewhere, and they vote to end like a sanction on some country, or not sell weapons to someone who's doing something problematic. Outside of that, you're basically going to get L's across support from the Republican Party. But let's not pretend that a solid 30 out of 100 times the Democrats are huffing paint.
I think Kyle Kulinski has very bad political instincts, And I think his take on the endorsement from Cheney is just wrong. The amount of people on the left that were planning on voting for Kamala but are now hesitating because someone like Liz Cheney is on the stump supporting her is minuscule. I don't know if you could find 3 people.
I don't know if you can find 3 people who were swayed because of Liz Cheney. I guarantee you I can find 3 people that were swayed in the other direction. That also goes against your political instincts, you Californian. You need to touch grass in the flyover state.
People in the entire country that would say, well, I was going to support Kamala, but I don't know. I don't know about seeing her with Liz Cheney on a stage. On the contrary, the amount of Republicans who are yearning to go back to the party of Reagan, to the party of actual fiscal conservatism, people that are very much turned off by Donald Trump's repeated attempts to undermine our democratic institutions, those people do not exist in small numbers. That is a not so insignificant chunk of the Republican Party. You have to remember that we did have a series of Republican primaries, even though Donald Trump didn't show up to a single debate. And, you know, in fairness, if I was him, I don't know if I would either. But we were seeing states a month, 2 months after Nikki Haley dropped out of the race that were writing in Nikki Haley to the extent of 10, 20, 25%. Again, like a month or 2 after the election.
I think we made this point too earlier, but like if Nikki Haley had endorsed Kamala Harris, I would totally understand touting that endorsement too. I can overlook the morality of joining forces with a horrific opponent, someone like Nikki Haley. If there's actually an electoral case for it, I think there would be. But again, I just don't see that with Liz Cheney, and I don't think Kamala Harris is going about this strategy in a sophisticated way. Like I feel like Obama, every Democrat has done this, right? You try to appeal to the center, you try to appeal to the right wing. Obama famously, he told black kids to pull their pants up or something like that, to sort of assuage pick Joe Biden. Exactly. But the difference is like Obama was actually promising a genuinely progressive vision. He was actually promising a serious, new vision for this country that probably did make some moderate voters a little bit uncomfortable, oh, this is kind of crazy. So he kind of had to do that a little bit. I feel like what's missing from Kamala's campaign is that she's not really promising that truly bold progressive future, that truly bold vision. She talks about going forward but not backward, but then doesn't really lay out what the forward means, and then just tries to appeal to a bunch of Republicans. And it's like, okay, now you're just pandering to the right, and we don't get anything. The left, the base, we don't get anything.
Right. And one of the things we definitely highlighted the Nikki Haley thing. Nikki Haley and Liz Cheney are not interchangeable. Nikki Haley had a base. It was a small base amongst the Republican Party, but it was that suburban right wing, we won't go back voter. Like, I have bigger fish to fry than abortion. I think we should save women's life, blah, blah, blah. A lot of women that like Nikki Haley love that. I don't want to do abortion as a form of birth control, but if it'll save a woman's life, then I guess it's up to the doctor. Like, that's the kind of woman that Nikki Haley wins over. Liz Cheney has no base. She has no base. And that goes to show that this guy's a real political novice, because he thinks if he knows the name that they have a base somewhere. But there was such a rejection in the Republican Party of that neocon era. That's why Liz Cheney is out with the Democrats. That's why Dick Cheney is out with the Democrats. That's why George Bush, they've all been rejected and humiliated by the Republican Party. That's why they've been embraced by the Democrats. And to your other point, that they just don't sink their teeth into one or two popular progressive things. That's what the drum we've been beating all along. You picked Tim Walz. Why not take one of the many progressive accomplishments of the guy, right? This guy Hutch even pointed out, like, he narrow majority in Minnesota, a 1-vote majority. He accomplished so much. So let's talk about how we're gonna, one of Barack Obama's, it was a failure, but it sold really well from a marketing perspective. The changing the school lunches, right? The food revolution. Our kids are so obese and
the Michelle
overweight.
Obama.
The Michelle Obama thing. I think you go on giving every kid breakfast and capping grocery inflation. And something like that.
I don't know why they don't lean
back
into the
child
inflation
tax
thing
credit.
more.
100%.
It seems so obvious to lean into the inflation thing at least, but crickets. It's really wild, guys. I mean, I get the strategy. I think they were talking about it on the Majority Report. They were saying like the pre-convention strategy was to lean into the left. Tim Walz pick, talk about price gouging. Post-convention strategy is to pander to the right. And it's like, I guess, I hope it works out for you guys. I hope it works out for you.